The White House wasn't always white. The building that now houses the most powerful office on Earth began as a gamble in a swamp, designed by an Irishman, constructed by Scottish stonemasons and enslaved labourers, burned by the British, and nearly abandoned before it ever became a symbol. In 1800, the first president to occupy it moved into rooms that were unfinished, unheated, walls still wet with plaster. Abigail Adams hung laundry in what would become the East Room. 40 years later, the structure was still incomplete. 80 years after that, engineers discovered the floors were holding up only from force of habit. By 1948, the building was collapsing. The leg of the president's daughter's piano broke through the floor and into the room below. The solution was radical: gut the entire interior, leaving only the exterior walls standing, held upright by steel scaffolding. Inside that hollow shell, workers built a modern steel frame building, then reconstructed the historic rooms around it. Today's White House is an 18th century facade wrapped around a 1950s skeleton, a symbol preserved by completely replacing what it symbolized. This is the story of how that symbol was built, burned, rebuilt, and secretly reconstructed. It begins not with architecture, but with a political compromise that chose a capital in the middle of nowhere. The United States won its independence in 1783. For 7 years after that, the government had no permanent home. Congress met in Philadelphia, then New York, then back to Philadelphia, a rotating arrangement that projected weakness and instability. The Residence Act of 1790 was a compromise brokered to settle national debts and regional tensions. It established a new federal district on the Potomac River, a site that was, at the time, forest and tidal marsh. No infrastructure, no buildings, no city. The capital would be built from scratch. At its center would be two structures: a capitol for Congress and a house for the President. In 1792, the federal government announced a design competition for the President's House. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson submitted plans anonymously, a modest villa in the Roman style. The winner was James Holborn, an Irish-born architect trained in Dublin. His design borrowed heavily from Leinster House, the seat of the Irish Parliament, a Palladian mansion with symmetrical facades, refined proportions, and just enough grandeur to convey authority without extravagance. This was the tension at the heart of the project. The building needed to project power, but not resemble a palace. It had to house a president, not a king. George Washington personally reviewed the plans and insisted on one change: make it bigger. Holborn expanded the design by roughly 20%. The structure would be 3 stories tall, built from sandstone, with large ceremonial rooms on the ground floor and private quarters above. Architect Pierre L'Enfant, who designed the layout of the new capital city, positioned the President's House on a ridge overlooking the Potomac. Pennsylvania Avenue would connect it directly to the Capitol, a symbolic and physical link between executive and legislature. 2 branches of government, separated by distance, joined by design. Construction began in October 1792. The foundation was laid in Aquia Creek sandstone, a pale grey stone quarried 40 miles south in Virginia. It was porous, prone to weathering, and would crack under stress. But it was local, abundant, and workable. The building would rise from American ground, shaped by American hands, and by hands that were not free. The workforce that built the President's House reflected the nation's deepest contradictions. Skilled stonemasons came from Scotland, carrying expertise in carving and dressing stone that few Americans possessed. Local craftsmen, carpenters, plasterers, glaziers worked alongside them. And then there were the enslaved. They quarried the sandstone at Aquia Creek. They felled timber in Virginia forests. They fired bricks in kilns built on the construction site. Some were hired out by their owners to the federal government, paid wages that went not to them, but to the men who claimed to own them. Others were free African Americans, working for wages in a city that was being built, in part, by people it would not recognize as citizens. The Scottish masons shaped the exterior walls. Each block of Aquia Creek sandstone was cut to size, its face smoothed and edges beveled. The blocks were laid in courses, bonded with lime mortar. The walls rose slowly, 3 feet thick at the base, tapering as they climbed. Inside, the structure was brick. Thousands of bricks, molded and fired on site, stacked to form interior walls and partitions. The kilns ran constantly, fed with cordwood hauled from surrounding forests. Timber framing supported the floors and roof. Massive beams of old-growth yellow pine and oak were shaped with hand tools, adzes, draw knives, framing chisels. No steam power, no mechanization. Everything was moved by muscle. Sandstone blocks weighing hundreds of pounds were hoisted with block and tackle. Lumber was hauled by wagon and oxen. Mortar was mixed in wooden troughs, carried in hods up ladders and scaffolding. The work was slow, labor-intensive, and dangerous. In 1794, stonemasons struck for higher wages. They won. By 1800, the exterior walls were complete, the roof was on, and some interior rooms were finished. Most were not. The grand staircase was incomplete. Plaster was still drying. There was no running water. Fires had to be lit in every room to drive moisture from the walls. On November 1st, 1800, President John Adams arrived. He spent his first night in a cold, damp, unfinished house that smelled of wet plaster and wood smoke. The next day, he wrote to his wife Abigail, who would join him 2 weeks later. When she arrived, she found a mansion that was more construction site than home. The East room, intended as a grand public reception hall, was empty and unplastered. She used it to dry laundry. George Washington, who had overseen the project and insisted on its scale, never lived in the house. He died in 1799, a year before it was ready. The building he championed would become a symbol. But first, it would burn. August 24th, 1814. British forces marched into Washington. The United States and Britain had been at war for 2 years. A conflict ignited by trade restrictions, maritime impressment, and American expansion. Now the war came to the capital itself. The city was nearly defenseless. Most of the American militia had scattered after a brief skirmish at Bladensburg, Maryland. British troops entered Washington unopposed, with orders to destroy symbols of the American government: the Capitol, the Treasury, the President's House. President James Madison fled before the British arrived. First, Lady Dolly Madison remained until the last possible moment. As British soldiers approached, she directed the staff to gather state papers and whatever could be saved. Among the items, a full-length portrait of George Washington, painted by Gilbert Stuart. The canvas was screwed into the wall of the state dining room. There was no time to unscrew it. She ordered the frame broken and the canvas cut from its stretcher. The portrait was rolled and taken to safety. She left shortly after. That evening, British troops entered the president's house. They found a dinner table set for 40, food still warm. The officers sat and ate. Then they piled furniture in the center of rooms, doused it with gunpowder paste, and set it alight. Flames consumed the interior. Wooden beams, floor joists, window frames, plaster and paint. The fire burned through the night, fed by timber and the contents of 2 decades. By dawn, the roof had collapsed. The interior was ash. Only the exterior sandstone walls remained, blackened and cracked from the heat. The capital suffered the same fate. The Treasury, the War Office. Washington was a burned city, and there was serious debate about whether to rebuild or abandon it. Some in Congress argued for moving the capital elsewhere, Philadelphia or farther north. Others insisted on rebuilding in place. The decision was made to stay, and to rebuild on the same foundations. James Hoban, the original architect, was brought back to oversee reconstruction. He returned to a ruin. The sandstone walls were structurally intact, but deeply scarred. Smoke had stained the porous stone dark grey and black. Hoban's task was to restore the building according to his original design. Salvageable stone was cleaned and reused. Damaged sections were replaced. The entire interior had to be reconstructed. New timber framing, new floors, new plaster, new everything. The work took 3 years. By 1817, the structure was habitable again, but the smoke stains remained visible on the sandstone. To cover the damage and protect the stone from further weathering, Hoban ordered the exterior walls coated with a thick layer of white lead paint. The building had been called the President's House officially, and White House informally, since its construction. Now the name fit. The white painted walls became the structure's defining feature. What had been a practical solution to cover fire damage became an identity. The building that rose from the ashes in 1817 looked much as it had before. But it carried a new meaning. It had been destroyed and rebuilt. It had survived. The White House that emerged from Reconstruction in 1817 was a restored Georgian mansion. Functional, elegant, but incomplete. Over the next century, the building would be reshaped into the icon recognized worldwide today. The transformation began with architecture, continued with technology, and culminated in a redefinition of what the presidency itself required. In 1824, James Hoban returned once more. President James Monroe commissioned him to add the south portico, a semi-circular columned balcony overlooking the south lawn. The addition was pure neoclassical grandeur, ionic columns supporting a curved roof, accessible from the second floor, providing both shade and a ceremonial platform. 5 years later, the north portico followed. Andrew Jackson ordered its construction in 1829. This entrance was different, square, formal, a porte cochere with massive columns framing the main door. Carriages could pull directly beneath it, depositing visitors under cover. Together, these 2 porticos completed the visual identity of the White House. They gave the building its symmetry, its stately proportions, its unmistakable silhouette. What had been a dignified but somewhat plain box became a temple of democracy. Inside, the 19th century brought modernization. In 1833, running water was piped into the building, eliminating the need to haul it from wells. 15 years later, gas lighting replaced candles and oil lamps, though fireplaces still provided the only heat. In 1891, electricity arrived during Benjamin Harrison's presidency. The installation was new, the technology unfamiliar, and the president and his wife reportedly refused to touch the switches themselves, fearing electrocution. Staff turned the lights on and off for them. Each upgrade made the building more livable, but none addressed the central problem. The White House was both a home and an office, and by 1900 it was failing at both. Theodore Roosevelt became president in 1901. He arrived with a wife, 6 children, and a work style that demanded space, staff, and efficiency. The second floor of the White House was chaos. Bedrooms mixed with offices, family life colliding with official business, clerks working next to nurseries. Roosevelt found it intolerable. In 1902, he hired McKim, Mead and White, one of the most prominent architectural firms in America. Their task: separate the residence from the workplace. The solution was radical. All presidential offices were removed from the main building and relocated to a new structure, a one-story office wing attached to the west side of the house. It was officially called the Temporary Executive Office Building. It became known as the West Wing. The West Wing created physical separation between the president's public and private lives. The second floor of the main house became entirely residential. The new wing held offices, meeting rooms, and staff workspace. In 1909, President William Howard Taft expanded it further, adding the Oval Office, a room shaped to echo the elliptical blue room in the residence, a space designed specifically for the president to work and receive visitors. This was the White House's most significant structural evolution. The building was no longer just a mansion where governing happened to occur. It was now a complex, a family home attached to a dedicated executive headquarters. The presidency had outgrown a single structure. The West Wing made the modern White House possible. But beneath the upgrades and expansions, the original building was dying, and no one knew it yet. By 1948, the White House had survived fire, war, and a century of modifications, but it could not survive time. The original timber frame, installed during the 1790s reconstruction and again after the 1814 fire, had been weakened by 150 years of stress. Renovations had added weight without reinforcing support. Steel beams installed in 1927 to carry new third-floor rooms now pressed down on rotting wood. The structure was buckling. Engineers examined the building and found catastrophic failure throughout. Floor joists sagged dangerously. Load-bearing walls had shifted. The ceiling of the state dining room had dropped several inches. Inspectors described wood so deteriorated it crumbled when touched. The most alarming moment came in Margaret Truman's second-floor sitting room. A piano leg punched through the floor, its support beams collapsing into the family dining room below. The building wasn't just old. It was unsafe. President Harry Truman ordered a full structural assessment. The conclusion was unambiguous. The White House could not be repaired. It had to be rebuilt. The decision created a dilemma. The building was a national symbol, its exterior walls sacred. But those walls were all that could be saved. In 1948, the Truman family moved out. The renovation began. Workers dismantled the interior entirely. Floors, walls, staircases. everything removable was taken out. Historic wood paneling, mantels, and decorative elements were catalogued, numbered, and stored. What remained was a hollow shell, 4 exterior sandstone walls standing alone. Those walls were structurally compromised. To prevent collapse during reconstruction, engineers erected a steel skeleton inside them, a framework of scaffolding that held the exterior upright while everything behind it was replaced. Inside that cage, construction crews built a new building. A complete steel frame rose from new concrete foundations. Steel columns carried the load the old timber never could. Fireproof materials replaced wood wherever possible. 2 basement levels were excavated, one containing a bomb shelter, a recognition of Cold War realities. Once the steel frame was complete, the interior rooms were reconstructed. But this was not restoration. It was replication. Workers rebuilt the spaces to match their original dimensions and appearance, reinstalling the salvaged historical elements, paneling, moldings, mantels, onto walls that were now attached to steel, not wood. The exterior walls received the same treatment. The original sandstone was reinforced from within, supported by the new steel structure, then cleaned and repaired. From outside, the building looked unchanged. Inside, it was utterly transformed. The project took 4 years. In 1952, the Truman family returned. What they returned to was a paradox. An 18th century building that was, in fact, a mid-20th century construction. The White House retained its historic appearance and spatial layout, but it stood on modern engineering, a steel and concrete structure built inside a preserved facade. A decade later, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy recognized what had been lost. The Truman renovation saved the structure, but stripped it of authenticity. In 1961, she launched a historical restoration of the public rooms, acquiring period furniture, art, and decorative objects that reflected the building's history. The White House became what it remains today, a museum that people live in. The building now serves contradictory purposes simultaneously. It is a family home, a symbol of the presidency, a working office complex, a fortified command center, a historic house museum, a target. The White House has been under continuous construction for more than 2 centuries, not as a failure of planning, but as proof of adaptation. Every generation has rebuilt it according to the needs of its time. The structure that stands today is the sum of those changes. Foundations laid in 1792, walls burned in 1814, porticos added in the 1820s, a steel frame installed in 1950, and security systems upgraded constantly. It endures not because it has remained unchanged, but because it has never stopped changing. The White House has never stopped being built. What began as sandstone and timber in a Potomac swamp became a fire-scarred shell, then a steel-framed fortress disguised as an 18th century mansion. Every generation has remade it, adding porticos and electricity, gutting interiors and pouring concrete, installing bomb shelters beneath rooms where Abigail Adams once hung laundry. The building endures not because it preserved some original purity, but because it abandoned that purity completely. The walls are Georgian, the skeleton is modern, the symbol is continuous. This is the structure's deepest truth,